Welcome to the April 21st, 2015 meeting of the Complaints Committee of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. Why don't we proceed with item 1?
Item 1, call to order, roll call, and agenda changes. Just to note, Member Copra has informed us that he could not attend today. Chair Washburn has appointed Member Pilpel to sit as a temporary member of the Complaints Committee for today's meeting only. On the call of the roll, Member Pilpel. Pilpel present.
Present.
Member Washburn.
Present.
Washburn present. Chair Hefner.
Present.
Hefner present. We have a quorum.
And moving on to item number 2.
Yes, I have spoken with both the complainant and the respondent, and I think they are in agreement that item number 2 and 4 can be heard concurrently as the complaint is similar. Item number 2, file number 15029, complaint filed by Michael Petrellis against Angela Calvillo, clerk of the board, London Breed, president, and David Campos, member, board of supervisors, for allegedly violating Administrative Code sections 67.21 and 67.25 for failure to respond to a request for public records in a timely and/or complete manner. Item number 4, file number 15021, complaint filed by Michael Petrellis against Supervisor David Campos, board of supervisors, for allegedly violating Administrative Code section 67.21 and 67.25 for failure to respond to immediate disclosure requests in a timely and/or complete manner.
Okay, so as our ordinary procedure goes, we'll have the complainant speak to us.
Do we need to start with
jurisdiction? Jurisdiction, excuse me. Wow.
Do you need a motion on?
Sure. It's, yeah.
Can we do a motion for both at the same time?
Yes, we're hearing them concurrently.
So move.
Second.
And without objection?
Is there any public comment?
Oh, public comment, excuse me.
There is no public comment regarding jurisdiction. The motion to find jurisdiction is approved without objection.
And then we'll have, I'd like to hear from the complainant then. Now, we are hearing 2 files at once. How do we want to handle...
I believe we can stick with the 5-minute time limit as the issues in both complaints are the same.
If that's okay with the complainant, okay. Then let's proceed that way. Thank you.
Hello, Michael Petrellis. I have filed a complaint against these parties because I've not been provided with documents. The documents I requested are public records. They are emails. I went wide, as I put it, in terms of what I was looking for. With the request regarding David Chu's emails, I asked for all the emails from January 1st through December 31st, 2014, the entire year. Part of the reason why I went so wide is because of all the news about Hillary Clinton and her destruction of emails. The reporters who were filing FOIA requests for Secretary Clinton's emails were not specifying they wanted emails about gays in Uganda or about personnel pay for State Department employees. They were asking for all of the Secretary's emails, and as we now know, she has destroyed them, or most of them. I believe that I have clearly identified the public records that I am seeking. All of these emails. To back up a little bit, last year to Mr. Dorsey, I made a request for a lot of emails from Dennis Herrera's secretary, Tara Collins. After a lot of back and forth, we eventually got thousands of emails from the city attorney's office. Not only did the city attorney release thousands of emails, but he put them on his website. There were so many emails, he could not send them to me via email. There's a document in this packet here showing the webpage that the city attorney created. To share thousands of emails. I'm mentioning this because I believe it's precedent. If we have the city attorney's office turning over thousands of emails and posting them on the website, I believe the clerk of the board, who is the custodian of David Chu's records, she should be turning over those thousands of emails to me. Regarding the request to David Campos, I am making the same argument that the city attorney turned over all those emails, made them public, they're on the web for everyone to see. And I would like for this committee to find the clerk of the board and David Campos out of compliance. And I'd like for you to cite the precedent of the city attorney and what he did with Tara Collins's emails last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petrellis. And do we have representatives from?
There are
Right. Is there anybody present to provide facts and evidence in support of the complainant at this time? Seeing nobody, let's move on with representatives from the respondents.
Take care. In case you need it. Okay. I've got my own copies. Thank you.
And there are we do have multiple respondents here.
And we'll have questions for Mr. Petrellis in a bit.
Certainly. My concern is, do we provide additional time for each respondent, given that it's two files?
Did you guys want to speak for 5 minutes?
We have the representative from Supervisor Breed's office here.
Yeah.
Yes, there are 3 respondents in this matter.
Okay.
So what I can do is I can speak on behalf of the board, and then generally on all the records requests, because I was copied on all of them. And if the supervisor's offices would like to speak in support, or if they have any additional information to add, is that permissible?
If that sits well with the representatives from Supervisor Campos and Supervisor Breed's offices.
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds fair.
Thank you.
Okay. Ready anytime. So, hi, my name is Wilson. I'm the records manager for the Office of the Clerk of the Board. I was copied in all of these Sunshine complaints. Just to recap, there was a March 2nd, 2015 immediate disclosure request to address to Campos's office, requesting for any and all emails from January to March. Another request to President Breed's office on March 16th, requesting for any and all emails without any discrimination on subject from January 1st to March 13th of 2015. On the 16th, Mr. Petrellis requested from the clerk of the board for any and all emails sent or received by former President David Chu from January 1st, 2014 through December 31st, 2014. And then on the 18th, what wasn't mentioned was that Mr. Petrellis requested from the clerk of the board a list of any and all records, anything, without any specified time frame that members of the board of supervisors or their staff have, which is incredibly expansive. So first off, the allegations that we didn't respond in time were completely untrue. We responded to each and every single one of those requests within 24 hours, requesting for additional clarification to help narrow down a subject matter that he's particularly interested in. I understand we're not prying into what he's going to use the information for, but in order for us to identify the information, to extract that information, to provide to him in a reasonable time frame and in a reasonable manner, we did request that information for him, because comprehensively he did ask for 14 and a half any and all emails for a 14 and a half month period. Supervisor Campos's office alone has, we're not even talking about thousands, we're talking about tens of thousands of emails in that office alone within that 3-month time frame. For Supervisor Chu's office, same thing applies. And then the city attorney's good government guide, which is prepared in consideration of all legal requirements and codes, specifically states that public records requests must specify an identifiable record or category of records sought, and that's in accordance to California Code 6253B. And we don't necessarily, we don't need to have the requester provide an exactitude in requests or limit their request to, to date, author, or recipient, but it should be sufficiently clear that the department understands that what the records are the subject of the request. Any and all emails is not a subject. And then the law also generally does not allow a requester to look indiscriminately through a department's files where such files are not otherwise made available to members of the public. Accordingly, public records requests may not require access to, quote, all of your records. And then the guide further explains that public servants should make a conscientious effort to assist requesters in identifying the information that they seek, which is exactly what we tried to do. But not only are those requests expansive, it's incredibly burdensome. It may sound easy to just say, hey, why don't we just extract all these emails technically in in an Outlook file or whatever file. However, each and every single one of those emails requires review to see whether there is any personal information contained in those emails, each and every single one. Whether there's any emails or communications that are attorney-client privileged in context. And then as well as, and they would also have to check each and every single staff's computer as well. And responding to such requests is just simply not feasible within the real-world constraints without narrowing down that subject within the city staffing and budget. And the demands of this indiscriminate request would basically undermine the department and the supervisor's office's ability to perform any other official duties. And that's our rationale for it. And we remain open and willing to provide that information to Mr. Petrellis if he could just let us know what it is that he's searching for. And we'll be glad to provide it, as we always have.
Okay, thank you. And if there are any individuals present to provide facts and evidence in support of respondents?
Hi, good evening. My name is Carolyn Goosen. I'm a legislative aide with Supervisor David Campos. And I just wanted to echo what Wilson has communicated. We did, upon receiving the request from Mr. Petrellis, within 24 hours, respond and provide the calendars that he had requested. When it came to the emails, again, we requested more specificity in order to respond to any particular subject matter. We have many, many times in the past always responded within 24 hours to Mr. Petrellis, and he has asked for specific subject matters in the past. And so Wilson has already quoted from the Good Government Guide. This is also what we've used, and when we asked the city attorney, he also did state that this is we can ask for a subject matter, and there needs to be a particular subject that we can then search for. Again, there are tens of thousands of emails that we receive. And he also asked for, telephone logs, all telephone logs, and we don't really have a telephone log system, so this could be really any piece of paper in our office, printout, document, little, sticky note where we have any piece of information that we might have written down during any phone call. So in terms of the combination of going through just random, all emails and all logs during this time would be very burdensome. It would effectively stop the work of our office. This would be very, very time consuming. So the combination of the lack of specificity and this fact of this, need to look over all the pieces of paper. It was just very difficult. And we asked him, our office did respond and say, please we're happy to comply. Please provide us with a subject matter, and we will look for that for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other individuals to provide facts or evidence in support of respondents?
Good evening, Connor Johnston, Legislative Aide to Board President London Breed. When our office receives or is in the process of responding to an immediate disclosure request, our process is always to immediately consult with the City Attorney's Office and the Clerk's Office. And as my colleagues have already pointed out, the Good Government Code and the California Government Code clearly stipulate that this disclosure request is not valid due to lack of specificity. Ergo, this complaint is not valid and has no merit. Thank you.
So the matter is now with the task force. I think that I would like to start with consideration of the email requests because they are Mr. Petrellis, Member Petrellis, do you have something? Mr. Petrellis. Oh, Member Pilpel, excuse me.
I was just going to start by asking Mr. Petrellis to explain what he was looking for. There's a lot of email back and forth, and it wasn't clear to me exactly what he was trying to get.
We can ask him that. I don't think that that's really the point of the request, and I think that
not why. No, not at all.
The complainant.
Why, but the what. I'm still not even clear on the what.
Well, his request was for emails, all emails, for instance, received from and sent by David Chu's
right
email address, irrespective of subject, and I think that that's
all right. I'll follow up at the appropriate time.
So
if you don't want to,
okay,
that's fine.
I think that we need to first consider this request as it was made, which was as a bulk request for emails sent to or sent from the email address david.chu@sfgov.org from January 1st, 2014 through December 31st, 2014.
Okay.
And I that's
fine.
We can get more specific later, but that is the nature of the request. I think that there are a few issues that we need to consider, the timeliness of the response being one of them, whether the records were specifically identified in the request, which is an interesting question, and the last issue, which was raised by the respondent, William Ng, or respondent's representative, rather, regarding the burdensome nature of the request. I have thoughts on a lot of these things. I would like to begin with sort of talking about whether this was a specifically identified record, whether the record was specifically identified. And I want to start there because it was the most interesting question to me, and I did some follow-up research on this, I actually believe that there are other concerns at play here, but I actually do believe that this record is specifically requested. It is a specifically identifiable record, right? It is a properly formed request. So I'm not persuaded that this is not a specific record or an identifiable record. The bulk and the amount, the size of what's being requested is not relevant to a determination of whether a record is specifically identifiable. And that's pretty well settled case law. And I don't think that the Good Government Guide really gets down to that level of specificity in interpreting what constitutes a specifically identified record. That is not the only consideration at play here. And the other consideration that needs to be considered is the burdensome nature of the request. And in Public Records Act request law, the burden of production rests with the respondent, with the person tasked with responding to the request. And that is a question that I would like, I'm happy to hear from members about any of these issues, but that one is a little more open to me personally.
Well, first of all, I want to say regarding the Good Government Guide, I've heard it evoked a couple of times here, and the task force does not follow the Good Government Guide. We follow the law. A member of one of the ethics commissioners opined that the Good Government Guide is ruminations by the authors of it, so that's how we regard it. Okay, that aside, and I agree with Chair Hebner that the question was framed in a completely unambiguous way. The request is for all emails. That's probably clearer than you would have gotten if he'd been more tried to narrow his question. There's a provision in the ordinance for voluminous requests I can't find the chapter and verse here. But if a request is for an enormous amount of information, and I agree that asking for all emails and expecting to get them back in 24 hours is asking for a lot. But it's conceivable that without it being an overly burdensome task for any of the offices here, that records could be produced on a rolling basis. That's the term. Where is it? I'm not finding it. Okay, yeah. So it's in 6725A.
That's part of it, and then the bottom there talks about rolling basis.
Oh, wait. Where's the rolling basis?
It's subsection B.
Oh, B. If the voluminous nature of the information requested, its location in a remote storage facility, or the need to consult with another interested department warrants an extension of 10 days, the requester shall be notified that the records will be given on a rolling basis. And we've had cases where it's been considerably longer than 10 days. So that there's a way to handle this without expecting that it'll consume your office every waking moment until all of the emails are given. What I find interesting is that the city attorney's office was able to produce all these emails. I would be hard-pressed to send all my emails to anybody in a quick fashion, but I imagine Comcast or my university could. So there are ways to do this. Those are my thoughts right now.
Member Popo.
I, too, have a lot of thoughts on this. I guess I'm glad in a way that I came down for this hearing because there are lots of issues here. So if we're going to start with the David Chu request, because there were a number of requests made, if you want to start with that one, that's fine. So,
well, I mean, the fact is that these are, I used that as one of the bulk email requests.
That's fine. But
and then I think, if we can talk about the length of time or the number of emails that would pertain to each request.
That's fine. I just wanted to start with something, and that's as good as any. So I don't think that involves Supervisor Breed or Campos's office, so that would just be Wilson on behalf of the clerk. So let me start with Mr. Petralis on that. So you were asking for literally any and all emails sent or received by David Chu for calendar year 2014. So can you tell us what your expectation was regarding that request, how long it would take the city to respond, et cetera?
Yes, Michael Petralis again. Let me give an example. I filed an immediate disclosure request for all and any emails about HIV drugs and hepatitis drugs. This request was sent to the Department of Public Health late last year, and they, as expected, invoked an extension of time and sent me a number of emails saying that they had to contact the jails, the pharmacy, a number of divisions within the department and also within the jails, also at SF General. So it wasn't like all the records I wanted were at 101 Grove Street. Right. And what the DPH promised me is that documents had to be looked at. They expected them to be tens of thousands of documents because we're talking AIDS and hepatitis drugs. And it took, I believe, a month for the first documents to come from DPH, and then over a 2-week period, all these documents were sent to me. So I was expecting a similar response from these offices with the supervisors.
Okay.
Okay?
That's fine. So let me be clear. So you got a timely response saying, we got it, we're working on it, and it took between 4 and 6 weeks from your request to actually produce the records, and they literally gave you thousands of things, some redacted, some not, blah, blah, blah?
Yes.
Okay, that's cool. So you expected a similar response with regards to just the David Chu request. That's what I'm talking about for a moment.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you. So let me go to Wilson on that. I'm going to Wilson for a moment. Okay. So you received the request, you responded back and sought clarification, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Did you do an initial check to find out how many responsive emails exist for that time period?
For Supervisor Chu's emails?
Yes. Let's just talk about that first.
Yes, I don't have the number immediately off the top, on
Give me
paper
a
right now.
hint. 10,000, 50,000?
Yeah, several, like tens of thousands.
Okay. And you still have those emails. It's not like they were deleted or
Oh, no,
trashed. They exist?
They're there.
They're on
yeah.
a server somewhere?
So,
Okay.
so the main issue isn't that. The issue isn't how the files are stored or where the files are stored or whether it's in an offsite location or not.
Mm-hmm.
We have those emails. We have the exact file format. But then the main issue is having to review those each and every single one of those emails because we're not the originators of those communications. Each sent email, each received email, each archived email, as to whether any personal information is contained in there that needs to be redacted.
No, there's redaction review required. I understand
Right.
that. So if someone were to say, I'm interested in any email that you sent or received from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock this afternoon, right? That may be 2 or 3 documents, or 0, but let's say it's 2 or 3, right? You would have to do, search for them, conduct a redaction review, make them available, et cetera, right?
So that's under the. Well, I'm sorry.
Okay, and you would do that, presumably, right? Someone asked for the things from 4 to 5 o'clock this afternoon.
So that is under the assumption that I am getting 2 or 3 emails. Now, if you said that to the mayor's office and said, hey,
I'm just saying, for 2 or 3, you would do it.
I would like to make the distinction that an email is a file format and not so it doesn't really necessarily fall into the.
But it's a description.
Definition.
Do you agree that
record,
it's a description of a record?
It's a file format. Now, if I asked you, say, hey, I want every single record that you have that says that has .pdf at the end of it. I want every single file that ends in .docx. I mean, how would you retrieve that information? I mean, because it's not.
You would do a diligent search for that, and it may be that it's a reasonably described record or category of records. So what I'm getting at is if you could acknowledge that if there were 2 or 3 that you would get them and do a process and make them available, would you acknowledge that? Yeah.
As a matter of process, it's not a scalable process.
Well, that's when I'll get to that in a second, but at least on the 2 or 3, is that something that you could do?
As a matter of customer service, I might do that, yes.
Okay. So
I wouldn't necessarily advise that as a policy.
Okay.
Again,
so
it's
when
not
you get to the scalability and you're not talking 2 or 3, you're talking thousands, then I think a request for clarification is in order. You did that. The requester said, I've asked for everything. That's what I'm looking for.
Right.
If you then say, okay, we have done an initial search. There are literally thousands. In fact, you could probably provide the number, right? And say, this will take some time, right? We will need to start. And if you have a preference for December rather than May, tell us. Otherwise, we'll just start at the beginning and go to the end. And you can allocate a certain amount of time per day. And there's case law on this. I think we may hear about this at the next full task force meeting about a reasonable allocation of time. And whatever it is, 10 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever, some amount of time a day, you do that, and then the documents that are responsive, the redaction occurs, and you make them available. And so if today you get 5 or 100, and tomorrow you get 5 or 100, and it takes 3 weeks or it takes 6 months, that's what it takes sometimes to produce. We had a complaint at the task force several years ago, I think Chair Washburn will remember, involving the Department of Animal Care and Control, where they were looking for reports of something about lost pets or birds or something, and they said, this is thousands of reports, it's over a long period of time, we're going to have to review each one individually, find them, redact it, blah, 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 blah. And we said, okay, that's what the person wanted. For whatever reason, we don't care, that's what they asked for. And they said, okay, we will do that, and it will take us months. But they took the time, and it took them months, and they produced it on a rolling basis, and there you go. The point is that if you make a reasonably framed request and say, this is what I'm looking for, it doesn't matter how long it takes to produce, you can allocate a certain amount of time so that you're not shutting down the office, so that you're not, unable to respond to constituents or do the other things that need to happen, but that at the same time you're providing some amount of service to the requester to get their documents, even if it's a little bit at a time. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from here. And your thoughts?
Yeah. Now, if it is the task force's recommendation, I mean, I'll let you guys decide that. If it is your recommendation that that the department invoke the rule of reason, that we allocate a certain amount of time, we can certainly work with the city attorney's office on that, if that is your determination.
I mean, I think the bottom line is that you can't just say either that's too big, or we don't like it, or it's going to, grind us to a halt, blah, 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 so we're not going to respond at all.
No,
but
we did respond.
Okay,
we asked
or that we're not going to do a search, or we'll take it to a point, but beyond that, it's just too big, and we're not going to deal with it. And I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's just not a good response.
I'd like to hear from Member Washburn. I'm not satisfied yet. I'm that this is not too burdensome a request.
Maybe it is.
I want to just leave that question a little open. I would like to hear from Member Washburn on that.
Okay, so if we imagine that there is a burden that is just way too much to anybody, any reasonable person, well, it seems like that would be really hard to come up with. I can't imagine specifying. You can have, in a given calendar year, we can provide you with 1,000 emails, but no more. More than that's too much. So it seems to me that it would be hard to specify a burden. And I think that it can't be up to the respondent to set that. And it seems to me that this is a matter for the respondent and the requester to work something out that's going to satisfy a request, a legitimate request, well phrased, for which it is possible to get all of those emails to Mr. Petralis. So it is a very big request, and if it's done on a rolling basis, it's possible to comply. But you have a lot of other things you're doing in your office, so I think there are ways to work together here, but I don't think we want to come down as a task force on the side of saying, yeah, we want the public to get records that they request up to a point. And what that point is impossible to say, so we'll leave it up to the respondent, or we'll decide, and I don't know that I could decide. I think it's really ultimately a matter between the requester and the office, and I'm talking off the top of my head right now. This is a fascinating issue, absolutely fascinating.
Maybe I can ask some questions to try and get to the bottom of this. If you were to comply with this request, who in your office would be tasked with reviewing the emails?
That would be me.
That would be you.
And I can tell you exactly how much time it would take.
How much time would it take to do, can you break it down into...
The answer is it depends, actually.
Well, sure. Of course.
Yeah, so, Member Washburn, it's not as easy as saying, hey, there's 1,000 emails, then, if we can turn over 1,000 emails annually. It depends on the context of each of the emails, the length of the emails, because again, like I mentioned, we're not the originators of the email, so we would have to literally read through each and every single one of those emails and then also work with the city attorney's office on whether any of this information is privileged. So it's like a two-step effort. Number one, we need to actually refamiliarize ourselves with the record that we didn't originate, and then also consult with the city attorney's office on what needs to be redacted, if any, and what needs to be withheld, if any, before.
I want him to continue. Yeah,
So, I mean, that's the process.
and there could be, certain emails that require, fairly intensive review, and some that are, maybe even spam or advertisement emails that are very easily reviewed, and the amount of time spent on each of those varies pretty widely, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
But so you would be tasked with doing it. Is there any scenario in which that task could be outsourced to?
And pay another individual to do it?
Correct, yeah. Or an outside agency that has, familiarity with redaction rules, privacy.
I can't say I know a vendor that will do that.
Well, I mean, assuming that one exists, is that even feasible?
No, that's not something I think that the city should be, that anyone outside the city should be doing.
Then the answer is no, but I'd like to hear it from
Okay,
the
all right.
respondent.
So, I do believe there is a clause in the Sunshine Ordinance where if Mr. Petrellis agrees to it, we can certainly pass on those costs, but then our department isn't going to take on the burden of the cost of hiring an outside vendor.
And then,
But
okay.
I mean, if you want a ballpark figure of just exactly how long it would take just for Supervisor Chu's emails, we're not talking about days, we're not talking about months, we're talking about years.
So I am inclined to believe you, and I think that the burden here is extraordinary. And I think the other piece of the puzzle that I would like to ask the complainant about is to get to the bottom of the countervailing public interest in disclosure of these emails. And if I could ask a couple questions of the complainant. Because I think whenever you're considering a burden, you have to consider the countervailing public interest in the disclosure. And if that public interest is so high and so relevant, then the burden becomes, of course, a lesser factor in the ultimate determination. So there's, a case, for instance, this case that I've been reviewing, the State Board of Equalization versus Superior Court. And the records requested there included records of all interpretations of certain sections of the sales and use tax regulations, and that request would include this huge wealth of information, various records that would require an extraordinary amount of redaction, and the court ultimately held that was a production worth upholding, that the public was entitled to that. A big factor in their disclosure, or a big factor in their determination, and to overcome what they admitted was an extraordinary burden by the respondent in that case to redact personal tax record information and review each document carefully, was the public interest in the disclosure. And they found that that the public has a right to know how laws are interpreted over time, historically, and that would include every committee meeting, every communication regarding these subsections of the tax code, et cetera, right? An enormous amount of information, but the public has a right to know how these laws are being interpreted. And I'm curious. I'm not seeing, and it's a question as much as it is a statement, but I'm not seeing the public interest in just disclosure of the vast amount of emails, except, for instance, to say that it's possible, it's doable, they're out there, they weren't deleted, and that's kind of a statement that does not rise to me to the same sort of substantial level of we have a right to know how laws are interpreted. So what do you think of that? What is the public's interest in disclosure of this broad class of records? And how is that going to overcome I think you'd admit, is a pretty substantial burden?
Okay. First of all, I filed a recent IDR with the mayor's office for general records about the Homeless Navigation Center on Mission and 16th Street. And I kept it broad because I've learned keeping a request broad, you're going to get a lot more documents that you may not have initially thought about. With the IDR to the mayor's office about the Navigation Center, 2 pages were incredibly important. They were about an emergency declaration was declared about homelessness in San Francisco. No one knew that an emergency declaration about homelessness was declared to cut through the bureaucratic red tape in January to start reconstructing the bungalows on Mission Street. So that's one example of how a wide request helps the public. Okay, put the 2-page emergency declaration on my social media, and all of a sudden people are saying, "Wow, they declared an emergency about homelessness, and no one knew about it."
Okay, no, but that's distinguishable, right? Because you've narrowed that to a subject matter. Right. So
any and all emails between Bevan, Dufty, and anyone else about the homeless center, I believe, from December 1st through maybe April 15th, and thousands of emails were sent to me, and I go over each one.
Yeah. So in that instance, though. There's search string optimization. I mean, the burden on the respondent when you narrow it to a recipient or one email address about a certain topic it's a lower burden, it's a lower threshold than the huge. Maybe not. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of,
Well, I don't know how many employees work in the clerk's office, but I know that Bevan has a staff of 2. And I saw in what they produced, Christine Keener, his aide, was the one who was doing the redacting and reviewing of everything. So, she took her time doing this. Again, the mayor's office made it clear that because it was such a big request, it was going to take time. So I'm not going anywhere. Let's get the search and redacting process started. I would also like to tell you that I had to wait 3 months for the CHP to respond to a similar wide request, and you can read about what was turned over to me in this week's East Bay Express. The documents that were turned over to me showed that the CHP and law enforcement agencies in the East Bay had their anti-terrorism undercover cops on the streets. These emails also showed exactly how much monitoring of social media they were doing.
And what was the exact nature of that request?
It was for a 2-week period in early December when the undercover CHP officer was photographed aiming his armed gun at a photographer.
So is this a situation where you said any email regarding that incident in this 2-week period?
No, the request, and I can share it with you afterward, the request was any and all emails between public information officers within the Golden Gate Division and the headquarters in Sacramento for this time period, a 2-week time period, were what I requested. It took CHP 3 months to get me those documents.
And that was so you're making a point and then making the opposite point at the same time, and it's like that was for a 2-week period, and here you're requesting a 52-week period, and
we're talking different public agencies and different public officials. Of course,
Certainly.
My requests are going to be different. I want to make another point about the DHP request that was for like a year or so of emails regarding HIV and hepatitis drugs. You want to talk about burden? I have the burden of reading all of these documents and deciding what to do with them. In the case with DPH, those documents showing how the budget for those drugs could have been bankrupted by a Gilead company were shared with the Fair Pricing Coalition and advocacy organizations back east to say to these drug companies, lower your prices.
So
that's where the public good comes in.
Right. It's in each of these instances that you've displayed, you're either talking about an instance in which there was a limited subject matter that you were looking for, or there was a much narrower time frame that you were looking for. And in assessing the burden on the respondent to produce here and comparing it to the current circumstances where you've requested any and all emails sent to or from this email address for an entire year, that's a broader time frame, and it's not limited to subject matter at all, and it makes two things. One, it makes the public interest a little harder to grasp, because I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for. And maybe you're not either. Maybe this is a fishing expedition and you're, genuinely looking for, David Chu's hypothetical, theoretical orders to put, anti-terrorism squads on the streets. Or this is, and the second aspect of it is it makes the burden a lot more obvious when the public interest is harder to grasp. Those are the two pieces that I'm weighing here, and that's maybe transparently about where my head is at right now. I'm trying to weigh the public interest, which is harder for me to grasp, with the burden, which is a bit easier for me to grasp right now. Member Popo?
There's a lot going on here. I guess I'm hearing what Chair Hepner is saying, and I guess I'm a bit surprised at how much you're pushing back on this, but be that as it may. I think this really is some very serious stuff, because as I see it, you're looking to hold public officials accountable, and if the government says, no, we're not going to tell you, or we're not going to give you that information, then you can't hold people accountable, and that's no good. On the other hand, if you're asking for stuff that they say it'll take us forever to get, and it's an unreasonable request, then that doesn't work either. So I think our task here is to try to figure out, is there a middle ground? Is there a way to figure this out? I'm almost inclined to say that we should put this off and ask for the city attorney to weigh in. This almost seems like the kind of thing where a supervisor of records request would be appropriate, and let the city attorney advise or opine on where the balance should be struck. We can't require that of you. We could certainly request that on our own. We could request, for example, that the Board of Supervisors do this search for, the month of January or the first week of January, and see how much time and resources that takes.
I'd be amenable to that.
Hey.
Okay, all right.
1 month.
All right.
Hey, that's
See, we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And see how long that takes and what that yields. And then you can decide whether to proceed further, and if so, how. So I think these are not... these don't have to be extreme positions of, yes, you're going to get everything immediately, or no, you're not going to get anything ever. I think we need to sort of parse out somewhere in the middle.
Well,
if you're
and-
open to that last bit, let's see where we can go
Yeah.
with that.
I like this idea a great deal.
I would also throw out that the other middle ground solution, in admitting that this also is not a zero-sum game, but is to encourage requesters of information to find a more, I don't know, to make the public interest in disclosure more clear. It's a factor in.
Well, I'm not. No, that really violates the spirit of the Sunshine Ordinance, which the requester does not have to give anybody any idea of what that request is all about.
And to the extent that you're suggesting a balancing test in disclosure, that's a 6255 or similar kind of thing that's specifically prohibited in Sunshine. So I'm tending to shy away from sort of a burden on the requester to show why.
Right.
But, I mean, I think in a specific instance one may be able to, but in a broad sense, not so much. Could we go back to that idea of at least the David Chu thing? What's good? Would the first week of January, the first 7 days of January, would that be a good start?
I think I said I would keep it to all of January, 1
Okay.
month.
All
Since
right.
we're talking the 12-month period I've asked for, let's see what 1 month would take.
Okay, so can I go to Wilson on that? If we just start with January of 2014, could you find a way to start through that, allocating some amount of time?
For specifically just David, Supervisor.
Just David Chu? We're just talking
David
about
Chu.
that right now. some amount of time per day, some amount of redaction, providing documents on a rolling basis, either in electronic format or as a PDF or however you can work that out.
Okay.
Is that something that you'd be willing to try, albeit reluctantly, very reluctantly?
Very reluctantly, yes, because this does set a strange precedent.
Well, Mr. Petralis was suggesting that the city attorney set a precedent by disclosing what they disclosed. I don't think that's true. I think they voluntarily did that, and and that's fine.
And that's not a precedent. We actually consulted with the city attorney's office on that particular.
However
matter.
you respond, it's how you respond to that. It doesn't mean that that's how we respond to everything in the future. Let's just deal with this particular thing. And if Mr. Petralis is saying, let's start with January, can we start with January?
I can identify the volume of it, and
Okay.
then we can go from there.
And inform Mr. Petralis, copy the task force, and start with that. And, I mean, at a minimum, if you could spend like a few days or a week on that, see what you can produce every day, however much time you can spend on it, and see how that works. Try.
Okay, well, I just...
I'm sorry. That is a little bit of a strange request, but I mean, I can certainly look into it. I wouldn't. Yeah.
I request a stranger. Never mind.
Right. No. I mean, it's within the same context.
Member Washburn? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to, Member Pilpel mentioned this when he first started talking. The important principle here is that those emails are public records. That information belongs to the public. And it is inconvenient to get it to the public, but it is the public's information. And think of it as a partial archive of former Supervisor Chu's work on behalf of his constituents in District 6. 3, sorry. And the rest of us. Okay. Right. So I think it's important to remember that. And I also wanted to say that we're starting to act like a compliance committee and not having a hearing. We need to think about possible violations here.
Right, and if we, if I can center us back on the question of whether a violation has taken place, I think that asking Mr. Ng to begin down this path of disclosing, a month at a time and trying to assess how much time that is to say that he has not demonstrated that the burden is too high for the city to comply with in this circumstance. I mean, that's essentially what you're saying, is that he needs to further demonstrate the burden of producing the requested records here, because we're not convinced that the burden is too high. I mean, that's the way I'm perceiving what the path that you're suggesting is.
I mean, there are a lot of parallels here. And I'm not suggesting anything good or bad about David Chu, but if someone were to say, look, I keep reading all this stuff in the paper about the police chief, I want all of the emails sent to and from Greg Sir in January of 2014, and if someone said, well, that's a lot to ask for, the police are really busy doing other things, well, I don't know, there's probably some fun and interesting stuff in there. I don't know what, I don't have time to look at that, but other people may, and, that's part of accountability here.
I'm sorry.
And it's sort of the how. I guess I'm just more stuck on the how do you make this work. If we can, I'm not sure that I'm ready to find a violation today, and I'm certainly not ready to let the Board of Supervisors off the hook on this. I'm willing to give them more time. I don't think Mr. Petrelli, I mean, we heard this pretty quickly. This was all like a month ago. So this came to us pretty quickly. It doesn't sound like Mr. Petrellis is needing this tomorrow. He just wants the stuff to look at it. So I think if we give the board some more time and ask them to actually spend some diligent time on this, and let's see what it yields. Some of it may be faster than you think, and some of it will probably be a lot slower.
If
Or
I may-
we could move to find a violation of 67.25B and send it to the full task force
We
and
could
see
cer-
what they've done in the
We
meantime.
could certainly do that, you know.
And-
Or we could do both. We could recommend to find a violation, and we could ask the board in the next 2 weeks to do something, and that might turn the task force against finding a violation and say, oh, it looks like they're working on it. I don't know.
Mr. Young?
It's a possibility.
There's no need to actually find a violation at this time. We could just refer it to the task force for additional hearing with
that too.
with a report of what has occurred here.
Okay, and I'm actually amenable to that suggestion because I think it gives both sides an opportunity to develop a little bit more clearly what the arguments are within the framework of the law, as I perceive it. I mean, I actually think that I'm a little maybe.
No, you get it.
I think I'm erring, well, maybe not erring. I think I'm a little bit more on the side of wanting this request to be a little narrower so that, you know, I think that in this case in particular, we're talking about the relationship between citizens and the government, and it's a two-way street, I think. If you want...
And the relative burdens.
And the relative burdens, and that's why it's a two-way street. And if you want certain information, and if the government is going to provide as much information as it can, there needs to be an understanding, I think, of what it is you're requesting. And on your end as well, the reciprocal part of that is the burden that it is placing on the office, potentially, you know? And I actually, I'm not comfortable coming to a final conclusion right now. I'm just not. I would like to hear more from your office about specifically what the burden, the contours of the burden to your office would be to produce a year's worth of emails. And I mean, like, you know, that may require demonstrating how long it takes to provide a month's worth of emails or a week's worth of emails, however it may be, you know, and, you know, I think that there's some desire to see you try, and if you fall flat on your face, then that goes before the full task force as part of your demonstration of burden. You know, if it happens to be a lot easier for you to do, and you know, you find out that after doing, you know, a couple hours of this review that you can do it pretty quickly and just kind of skim through them, maybe the burden's not that high, you know.
And practically speaking, if this stays in committee, then it's here 2 months from now. If it goes to the full task force, I don't think it makes it for May, it makes it for June, so that's 6 weeks out, and you'd have a deadline of like 5 weeks from now to provide something to the task force, which would, you know, kind of give time to test something here. So maybe sending this to the full task force without recommendation makes some sense here.
Maybe asking the complainant if we're, you know, flirting with that idea, is there an urgency to this request that would make that problematic? I think it's something that we need to consider.
My answer is no.
Okay.
You just want some diligent work on this. Yeah? Yeah. Okay.
Also of consideration, it's not just the clerk of the board. Should we, there's Supervisor Campos's office and President Breed's office. I don't know how you want to deal with that.
Right. And okay, so pulling back one additional sort of level, can we go down the categories of records again that have been requested? We had David Chu emails that were for a year period. Emails to or from Supervisor Campos. Emails to or from Supervisor Breed. And then there was an ask for calendars.
And there was something that was generally about everything, all kinds of records that?
That has already been responded to. The last item has already been responded to. The clerk of the board actually responded to Mr. Petrellis' request, saying that we don't have any records responsive to his request because he had requested for a list of any and all records that basically ever exist with no definitive time frame. In which case, we don't have a record because there is no such thing as a comprehensive list of any and all records. What we do have, for a completely different purpose, is a records retention schedule, which dictates when and whether we can destroy something or not.
And have you provided provided the record retention policy and schedule?
And that is perhaps responsive to his request, but it's that we don't believe that document.
I understood that request to be a list of the types of records, not a list of every single record, right? So
It's like
actually,
an index of records.
an index of records. So really, my first thought was exactly that, the schedule of records retention, and is that sufficient to provide you with a sense? And Mr. Petrellis, I'm asking you this question.
Is that on the agenda?
Yes, it is.
It is. It's buried in one of these.
It's in the first item.
Yeah.
Second item. Now, the index, just for clarification, Member Washburn, the index of records is exactly the same thing as the records retention schedule.
Right.
It's just a consolidated list of all citywide departments.
That's
Okay.
I get, right.
And we don't have any. That list doesn't exist if he's looking for any and everything, or categorically that we have. I don't think we've ever developed anything like that.
I thought what he was asking for was something like the index of records, the types of information you have, the categories of stuff that you have,
Which is
the index of records.
Yeah, or the record
or
retention
the record
policy.
retention. You know, we keep these things for this
Right.
amount
In which
of
case
time.
which we provided already.
Okay. All
So,
right.
Mr. Petrellis, were you good with that response?
Yes.
Okay. So, from my perspective, it seems that although these are cast as 4 different complaints, it seems to me that there are really sort of 3 buckets of things that are still live. One is the David Chu year's worth of stuff. The second is a variety of things from President Breed, and the third is various things from Supervisor Campos. And I think it would be easier for the task force if the complaints could be sort of recast in that way, so there's a more specific respondent as to, even if it were different dates and all of that, it's like whatever the Breed stuff is, let's have a Breed hearing, as it were. It's just, I don't know, maybe I'm off here, but I just think it's easier to deal with in that way. And I think we were sort of getting somewhere on the David Chu stuff.
So
I'm just getting a little disorganized.
Okay, and I apologize if I'm not contributing to that.
No, it's not. You're not. It's just the nature of kind of overlapping requests and complaints.
Could we maybe, if we have a tentative plan for the David Chu stuff, could we maybe go on to another thing? And it sounds like we already talked about the list of things, and that's sort of to bed. And so whatever's next.
The David Chu emails are complaint number.
Part of 29, item 2.
They're part of 29. I kind of want to deal with this complaint by complaint.
That's fine.
So if we deal with 29, which requested the David Chu emails, the index of records, that was 29, just those 2.
That's how it's summarized in the city attorney memo, but
I'm not certain why Supervisors Breed and Campos were respondents if the only records requested in 29 were David Chu's emails and the, what we're calling the index of records.
Victor, did you do your summary page for?
Yes, page 9.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so this is also indicating that the request included President Breed and Supervisor Campos' emails for those more limited timeframes. Correct? I'm asking the world, I suppose.
And then there's the fourth one that was number 4, request for any and all records of members of the Board of Supervisors and their staff for an unspecified time frame.
So if we've worked through 1 and 2 for the moment, could you, maybe, Mr. Petrellis, could you tell us on item 3, the request for President Breed and Supervisor Campos' emails for a specific time frame? And I think we still have Ms. Goosen here somewhere.
Is it on page 9?
Page 9 of complaint number 15029.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Commissioner?
Ah, you're still there. Welcome.
sorry.
Yes. I was just trying to get to item 3 that involved your office. So, Mr. Petrellis, I think it's on page 29 of the packet.
29.
There was a response from Ms. Goosen's colleague, Ms. Ronan, that you were seeking January 1, 2014 to March 1, 2015. The Campos email, as it were, and then also the calendars of the aides during that time. So in that response, I mean, there are lots of bits and pieces here.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like you indicated that you emailed the work calendars.
Yes.
Mr. Petrellis, were you good with that part of the response? The work
Calendars.
calendars of the staff? Yes. Okay, so you're still looking for the Campos email for 14 months?
Right.
Okay, and here they actually did indicate 86,000 emails, plus 6,000 in the sent, 92. So if you want to treat this in the same way as the David Chu stuff, do you want to start with a month or a week?
Except, sorry, so my question, though, and I apologize, this is my first time coming in front of the commission, but the task force, but we did get advice from the city attorney's office, who told us that there needs to be a subject matter requested. And so there seems to be, and when Mr. Petrellis did describe other examples of asking for documents, they all involved a subject matter. And so this is where I'm wondering if, I feel like the city attorney should be here to clarify, because that's the advice that we went under, as same as Supervisor Breed's office. And so it's,
Okay.
in this case, not sure, yeah.
Good interjection. So your position at this point is that you're not going to respond unless it's narrowed to a subject matter or some other
Exactly.
reframing? Okay.
I'm, and this is why I think that it's an interesting question, I'll admit. I almost think that the full task force should hear the issue. I mean, transparently, I'm just not, I feel like the burden is far too high.
But this is very much like it's no different from the David Chu instance, where we were thinking, let's try a month's worth. Again, it's a well-formed request, and wanting all the emails, and the requester doesn't have to indicate why. These are public records, all of them.
Okay. With all due respect, I think we're just missing the other piece, and it's not that we need to say, why are you requesting these, but we need to be able to understand what the interest is in compelling, these people who have indicated that they're stretched with resources to, take on this mountain of work. I mean, there needs to be some consideration of that.
Right, so that's why we're saying let's try a restricted amount of time.
Okay, and I'm not sure that we can compel them to do so unless we find a violation at this time. And we can ask them to do so
We can ask them to do so with the belief that that might stave off finding a
And
place.
I have a hard time asking them to do so, I
Well-
guess is what it's boiling down to. And
Let me try this. I'm not forgetting the city attorney point, Ms. Goosen. Putting that aside, if someone said, yes, let's do this, let's find a way to get at it, would you be with spending some time a day going through the first month or the first week and working on that either on your own or with Wilson or somehow to get through it? Or to attempt to? Would you be willing to do that?
In the past, we have responded to numerous requests.
Right.
We do take the time, and it is an extraordinary amount of time that we're not addressing the
Other
fires
things.
in the district and all these things that are happening. But we would. But of course, in this case, I think it's a question of I do want to talk to the city attorney and understand that piece.
So the answer. So what I heard is yes, if the answer was we should do this, and we haven't resolved that yet. So it sounds, and I suspect that the that the request to Supervisor Breed will yield the same or similar answer. So it seems to me like we're back to the question of where's Nick, that we need to get some advice from Nick's side of the world, from the government team, from the city attorney generally on where this balance lies. And that's not going to be dispositive for us, but it should inform us. And I don't think any of us should be flying blind on this and saying, well, I think the right thing to do is blah. I mean, there's some real thinking on this.
When we start talking about burden, what does the ordinance say? And what the ordinance says is it talks about voluminous requests and finding records providing them on a rolling basis. There's nothing in here about, in the ordinance about it's too much for the city agency or the city department to comply with.
But there's case law on that.
there's case law on it, and there's a notion of just reasonability. I mean, if I were to request 10 years of emails, there has to be some threshold where at some point the burden is so enormous and the public interest so elusive or so amorphous that there's a line somewhere. And this is clearly, I think that if this is well, and I think it's, credit to the complainant in this case, because I think that's exactly what he's trying to get us to think about, is where is that line? Is that line at 3 months of emails? Is that line at a year of emails? Is that line at 10 years of emails? And that line has to be considered with the burden that it places on these offices to go through that amount of email. I mean, we're literally asking them to divert their attention from other stuff, and that we need to justify. Usually, under the umbrella of public disclosure and transparency and open government, yes, we can justify that. Of course, we can justify that. These are public emails, but there's a line somewhere. I just got to believe that.
This is so funny because you're sounding more conservative than the rest.
I know, I certainly am, but it's just I understand. I researched this case coming in because I knew that it was getting at this issue, and it's one that's demanding that we
this is important. This is important stuff.
Turn the eye inward.
And I don't think those are the only considerations. I think had we been a few years before saying that we wanted to look at all of the emails from then Supervisor Jew, right, who represented my district, who was sent to prison. And, I think that there are instances where you actually do uncover wrongdoing or evidence thereof. I'm not suggesting anything with Supervisor Campos.
May I say something, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. But then I think we should move this toward resolution soon.
Yes. My understanding is that we have concluded the matter with David Chu's emails, that I will be in touch with.
No.
I think we're gonna figure
all right,
out.
that's still open.
We'll make
is there a way to bring closure to these matters and move them to the task force?
Yeah, we're getting there.
I think that's what you wanted to say. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Mr. Petralis. I think before we launch into rebuttals, I think that the idea here is to sort of cut off the parts that have already been responded to adequately and agreed to, and then my thinking is probably send the rest of the task force and ideally have a city attorney here as well to offer the city attorney's perspective on it. I think it needs to be in the room.
Could I just be sure that we didn't miss anything on page 9? We talked about 1 and 2. We talked about the campus element of item 3. Supervisor Breed's aide went back to the office, but should I presume buried in here was a request to Supervisor Breed's office for a similar pile of stuff for a period of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And so all the same principles apply. They could do it. It's a question of whether they have to, and we haven't resolved that.
Except a request for her calendars. That's a totally separate matter. The calendars are, I believe, way different than the...
Okay. I was going to get to that, but was that buried in this complaint, or is that in
Next item.
the next item?
That's the next item.
So what was the time frame for the Breed fishing trip?
Okay.
Does anyone know?
Oh, it would be from,
Can you point me to a page somewhere here?
yeah, I have that information. It's from January 1st through March 13th, 2015.
You have a page there?
No, that was just,
Somewhere. Okay.
that was just the original request.
I'll
that I
just
have.
assume it's in here
Could you
somewhere.
repeat those dates, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you repeat those dates?
It would be January 1st, 2015 through March 13th, 2015.
That was 15, not 14, correct?
15.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, and then item 4 on page 9, any and all records of members of the Board of Supes and their staff for an unspecified time frame. Where are we with that?
Oh, that one's done.
Mr.
Wait.
Pedralis?
Members of the Board of Supes.
You acknowledged that earlier.
I'm sorry, what page in the...
Page 9 of the packet, item 4. I mean, if we can narrow this just down to a...
Right. With it, yeah.
I know.
This was the list of all records that members of the Board of Supervisors and their staffs must keep as required by law. And this was what we were talking about as the index of records. We've been calling this like the sort of index of records that was satisfied by production of the retention schedule.
Right. I just want to be clear. I don't recall requesting any and all records from the Board of Supes. I'm requesting a list of what they are required.
I think that was an issue of just
Okay.
How that got
translation issue.
I'm not looking for everyone's...
Okay.
Just to clarify, I just wanted to...
Sure.
I believe that out of these two files, first off, I believe it would be relevant for me to combine the two files in question into one file.
Okay.
Second would be, I currently have a request for former Supervisor Chu's emails for the period of January 1st, 2014 through December 31st, 2014. And then the second request is a request for President Breed's and Supervisor Campos's emails for the specified time frame of January 1st, 2015 through March 15th, 2015. Those are the
The Supervisor Campos is 2014, January till March 15th.
2014.
Yeah,
15.
right.
So
It's
a year,
a
it's a year and 3
14-month.
months. Yeah.
Yes, those are the two those are the requests I have remaining as part of this complaint.
The 3.
Yes, one for Chu, one for Breed, one for Campos.
And all for a specified time frame.
Yes.
1 year, 14 months.
All the other complaints related to this have been resolved and are no longer an issue.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
yeah.
you. That helps.
Good.
Okay. So then we're just down to the email requests. Then is that correct?
I think so. Did that also cover what's in item 4?
Yes, it did.
Okay, got it.
So this is we're just talking about these bulk email requests, and
I think we can
just
again,
refer that to the full task force
we can
on
either
those
keep it
on
here,
those
or we
issues.
can send it out to the full task force without recommendation, and specifically ask the city attorney to opine, given these broad requests for a extended period of time, are they properly framed? Do they need to be narrowed? Can the rule of reason be properly invoked? What's their opinion on the validity of the thing?
Okay.
And that's not going to determine it for us, but that would be helpful. And if the parties want to submit anything further on that narrow question, I think that would be helpful. And if there are other approaches to narrowing the time frame or trying different ways to get at it, I'm interested in hearing that. I mean, let's try to solve the problem. It sounds like we knocked out a bunch of things today that already got dealt with, and so now we're down to this. We're getting somewhere.
If we are going to ask for the city attorney's opinion, I think it is a valid point to reference the Good Government Guide, which I understand.
They'll do that.
But what aspect of it? Curious, because
the California Code. The California Code that specifically cites, that they specifically cite. It's
for identifiable records?
For identifiable records, yeah. I've mentioned it before. It's California Code 6253B.
Right, and that's one that I investigated pretty extensively and came to the conclusion that the size of the volume of the records requested is not determinative of whether a record is reasonably identified.
Right. And any and all records or any and all emails. I just want to reiterate that email is a format. It's not necessarily a specific category of record.
So let's say this particular request yields thousands of things, right? As we heard earlier, DPH found thousands of things related to AIDS drugs. If you ask Muni about history of Muni streetcars, that's a pretty specific topic, but thousands of things over many, many years. So I don't know that it's timing, format, who. It's none of those specific factors that says it's a big pile of stuff, and just because it's a big pile of stuff doesn't mean that we don't disclose.
That's not.
And furthermore, I'm looking at the Good Government Guide, and it's not. They don't draw the line as exactly as It doesn't really help you too much. I think that they could help by elaborating on this specific instance. Where they draw the line is, public records requests may not require access to, quote, all of your records. This is certainly emails. All of your emails verges on that, but it is narrower than all of your records. All of your records, who knows? That's a situation where you have no idea what's being requested.
Right, but
all of your emails. I'm just saying that the Good Government Guide does not draw that line so clearly.
There's more to the Government Guide, though. It also says that it should be sufficiently clear and defined that it reasonably identifies the subject matter.
Yeah.
That's their analysis of the California Code.
Where are you looking at the Good Government Guide right now?
No, it's an excerpt of it. I can
So, a request may be sufficiently clear and defined that the department can understand what records are the subject of the request.
Right.
And that's
And page 91 of the guide also talks about the rule of reason, and we have history with Chemo Crossman about invoking the rule of reason with regard to the city attorney, and some of that is informative. Again, none of this is dispositive, but I think we need to look at these various aspects. This is not, due respect, but this is not open and shut for either side here. I don't think. Remember, Chair Washburn?
No, I was. I'm not remembering what the Chemo Crossman.
He was asking for a bunch of stuff from the city attorney, and they said, we'll do it a little bit at a time. And they did. And he said, I want it all. And they said, no, we'll give it to you, but it'll take some time. Right. And I think Mr. Petralis is similarly kind of saying, I want it, and I know that it's going to take time, but take the time, and I'll wait. He'll be here. He's not going anywhere. So I don't think Mr. Petralis is being unreasonable here. It's a question of whether the city has to produce, and if so, how quickly and how much due diligence.
Right.
And I don't think the city's disputing that either. It's
right. Yeah, well, all right. I don't want to belabor the point too much. I think it needs to go to the task force, and we need to get the city attorney's opinion on it.
Right.
So without finding a violation and without imposing any obligation on you at this time, other than to be prepared to demonstrate, the burden to the full task force at the task force meeting, which is going to be heard. I think that that's probably appropriate. I'm going a step short of compelling them to try to do a month right now. I think it's too soon for that, but that's my own inclination, and this is a panel of 3.
Do you need a motion?
I believe that could be construed as a motion. The motion is to refer the matter to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force for the June meeting, and to request that the respondent demonstrate the burden of the request.
That was more suggestive, but yeah, I mean, that's.
No, I like that.
Because otherwise, there's the potential for a violation here.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Petralis hasn't been given anything.
So Chair Hepner is making a motion? Want a second?
I have that as Chair Hepner making the motion.
Right, so moved.
Second.
All right. So I've got that as referring to the full task force for the June meeting without recommendation, requesting the respondent to demonstrate their burden either in writing or perhaps by testing a week or some amount. Wilson, if you do a test, it sounds like you would probably do the David Chu test because that's something that's up to you and doesn't impact the other 2 offices. So they don't need to go ahead and start that immediately. That's up to you if you choose to do so. And requesting the city attorney to provide an opinion on the matter. And it's limiting the complaint to only the 3 offices and those time-frames about the email. That's it. Nothing else. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And may I request the committee to provide the questions to the city attorney? I will draft them, but I would request that you review the questions to send to the city attorney's office.
I think that's appropriate. Thank you. Yeah.
And we'll send a copy of that request to the parties.
So is there public comment on the motion? Seeing none?
Rebuttals.
Rebuttals, excuse me. Right, we haven't even heard rebuttals. My goodness, okay.
I believe both
Correct.
parties
We've dissected this pretty thoroughly, and I think I understand your positions, but you are welcome to offer a rebuttal at this time. Okay, and from the complainant? Okay.
Is this fair? I mean, are we getting through? All right, good.
There are no members of the public in the room at this time. On the motion to refer the matter to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, Member Pilpil.
Yes.
Pilpil, aye. Member Washburn.
Aye.
Washburn, aye. Chair Hepner.
Aye.
Hepner, aye. The motion passes. I would like to take the following item out of order as the representative from President Breed's office is not in the room. Item number 5, complaint filed by Michael Petralis against Supervisor David Campos, Board of Supervisors, for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 67.21 and 67.25 for failure to respond to an immediate disclosure request in a timely and complete manner.
We're talking about...
1 second, please. Do I have a motion to find jurisdiction on this matter?
So move.
Second.
Is there any public comment regarding jurisdiction? There being no public comment, the motion to find jurisdiction passes without objection.
Okay, and again, let's begin by hearing from the complainant.
This is the complaint about I didn't hear back from the office after I'd filed an IDR, correct? I'm looking at pages 135, 136, 137.
I believe that is correct.
Right.
This is the records request pertaining to Plaza 16 Coalition and Andy Blue emails?
Yes, okay. This matter has to do with I sent the request to david.campos@sfgov.org, and I didn't get a response within the required time period. I sent a follow-up to that same address, and eventually I heard back from Hillary Ronan at Campos's office. My concern is that the public official whose records I am requesting has not been diligent in terms of looking at all of his emails or assigning someone on his staff to look at all of the emails, especially in case any of them are IDRs. After all of this was brought to the attention of Hillary Ronan, she sent an email to myself and I believe the task force also saying that they were now going to include an automatic reply on everything sent to David's Addy, that the request also be sent to someone in his office. That's nice, but I don't believe that there should be a burden put on the requester to send in the request to someone else. I think that the public official has to figure out a way with her staff or herself in terms of making sure all of those emails are read to see which ones are requests. Thank you.
And from the respondent.
Hi. So again,
Just to state, there's no speakers on behalf of the complainant.
Thank you.
sorry. Hi again, Carolyn Goosen in Supervisor Campos' office. So in this case, we do apologize that David was not able to respond directly within the 24 hours. He receives thousands of emails a week, sometimes thousands a day, and is unable to immediately respond. We, as Mr. Petralis mentioned, we added an automatic reply once we realized this was happening. And just wanted to note that prior to this request, Mr. Petralis has always CC'd one of the aides, and that's why we have never had this issue in the past, because we've always been aware of this and have responded accordingly. And we've always responded in time, and that has not been an issue. So he does know how to reach us. But in this case, it is true, as he said, that a direct email to the supervisor should have resulted in a response, which is why we added this automatic email, which states, due to the quantity of emails I receive, I am not always able to read every email every day. Therefore, if this email requires immediate attention or is a sunshine or records request, please forward the email to my legislative aides at these addresses. Thank you. I do not believe that having, an email forwarded, it takes 30 seconds is particularly onerous, and this would ensure that we can then respond to this. So, and again, once we were made aware of this request, we did immediately respond with all of the documents requested from Mr. Petralis.
Okay, and am I right? I just saw the complainant shaking his head. Is there any issue as to whether all documents were produced? Is that part satisfactory?
I have an email showing that they were.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we can.
Yes, all documents were provided to me.
Okay, so then the only issue here is timeliness of the response. Is there anybody to offer facts and evidence in support of the respondent in this matter? Seeing nobody, the matter is with the task force and Member Pilpel.
Just a couple of quick things. Wilson, I liked that paragraph that Carolyn quoted there. Can you urge the other offices to do something similar so that, if there's an email that just goes to Mark Farrell and doesn't get copied, so that we can try to avoid this problem elsewhere? I think this is a good solution. I like that.
I can bring it up with the clerk of the board to see whether it's appropriate to distribute a memo.
Okay. Where we find a better practice, I think it's good to do that. So if that takes care of that's one. You said that you got the documents. It sounds like there's a timeliness thing, so we may make a recommendation on a 25A violation. Yeah. And I would just note to Mr. Petralis, your subject line on the original request actually just said IDR, emails related to Plaza 16 Coalition Andy Blue. Under the ordinance, it actually needs to have the three magic words, immediate disclosure request. So just so you know, in the future, when you send an IDR in the middle of the night or whenever, I would write out immediate disclosure request so that they can't say, well, we're not searching for IDR, so we may have missed that.
Just to be clear, you're saying immediate disclosure request should be written out in the subject line?
In the subject line of the email.
Gotcha.
Those three magic words.
And that's like a very strict interpretation of 67.25A, and it does require that magic language.
Yeah.
Listen, if you're going to try and develop best practices for the city folks, you also got to put best practices to the requesters. So I appreciate this education.
We may find a way for them to search and flag emails every day that say immediate disclosure request in the subject line, and for them
Excellent
to all
point.
get flagged out. So anyway, but you've
Yes,
got the
and-
stuff, so that's good.
Yes, and I would just like to add that I had a similar problem with the fire department and the city attorney, where requests were sent to either Joanne Hayes White or Dennis Herrera. They never responded, and then I had to go through a whole nother request thing. So I hope that it's not just Wilson and the clerk of the board bringing this matter to the supervisors, but that somehow the word gets out to all department heads about this.
We're working on it.
Thank you. So the matter is now with the task force, or it remains with the task force. We could either find a violation of Section 67.25, which we've done several times in the past as a way to sort of just preserve the record. I think it's ultimately is a tap on the wrist, but not a whole lot more. I'm in a violation of an IDR response if the response did ultimately occur and absent a particular urgency that deprived the complainant of the use of that information for a particular purpose, which I don't sense in this case. Yes, Member Washburn.
Well, historically, we haven't required there to be some urgency or anything like that. If it was a properly entitled immediate disclosure request, for the record, we would find a violation.
Right.
And so in this case, because those three magic words weren't there, I'm not inclined to find a violation.
All right.
Okay.
And
just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that there be a requirement of urgency. That was only to say that there are situations where it can be a willful violation of failure to respond to an IDR if there was a specific date, a relevant date that was specifically delayed past that date. I'm in the same camp as Member Washburn on this, though, that if we're going to fault Supervisor Compos's office for a lapse in having the email forwarded to the right address, and similarly fault the complainant for failing to use the magic language. Maybe this is just a sort of a draw.
I was prepared to find a timeliness violation, but I don't think it matters that much. Would you feel strongly that we need to find a timeliness violation here? No. Okay. And you've improved practices, and I think we've all learned from this, so I'm happy to take... what do we have to do? Make a recommendation to find no violation, and the task force could decide.
Well, I think we should, right.
Okay.
But we should have ask Victor to put in some language about, okay, we're recommending that the Board of Supervisors and other city departments, for their principals, their heads, to have this message so that this type of thing doesn't happen.
Or at least, at the very least, in the recommendation, include some statement acknowledging the extra effort that Supervisor Compos's office displayed in putting in this additional protocol, which was not necessary and very appreciated. I think it should bear on our consideration in these types of matters whether the respondent has taken additional steps to improve. That's the ultimate goal, right?
Right.
So,
But I think we can highly recommend that it be a best practice. It's kind of like when you call a number and they say, if this is an emergency, call, whatever.
911.
Same. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's fine. Do you need
I believe the motion is to refer the matter to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force with the recommendation that no violation has occurred, and to suggest that specific language be included into the emails of the members of the Board of Supervisors regarding the ability to read emails immediately, and to refer the immediate disclosure request to the supervisor's aides.
and acknowledge that Supervisor Campos's office has already incorporated that language.
We
And
could
that
even make that available to members of the full task force so they know what Supervisor Campos has done.
Yes. May I ask who is making that motion?
I'll so moved.
Second.
Is there any public comment regarding that motion? There are no members of the public in the room. On the motion, Member Pilpel.
Aye.
Pilpel, aye. Member Washburn.
Aye.
Washburn, aye. Chair Hepner.
Aye.
Hepner, aye. The motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And then do we have,
One more.
Is Connor coming back? You need that? You want that? Are you requesting? Never
I
mind.
would
Go
like
ahead.
a break.
why don't we take a 5-minute break? And well, before we do, Mr. Ng, did you have something to say?
So Connor's actually left.
Right.
But I can speak generally on the matter, but I won't be responding on behalf of their office. But I
Is
can
he
speak
coming
generally
back,
on the
or are they
matter just
sending
because
someone?
we are.
I don't believe Connor is coming back.
Are they sending anyone, or are you it?
I don't believe so.
All right.
I mean, but I can speak generally on the matter on behalf of the clerk of the board as far as what we've received and what our perspective is.
Okay. Well, why don't we
so
take a 5-minute break and then
Sure.
decide what to do with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we
All right. And I guess we are going to resume after a brief break with item number 3 on the complaint committee agenda.
Yes, file number 15022, complaint filed by Michael Trellis against London Breed, President, Board of Supervisors, for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 67.21L for failure to make records available in any form requested, which is easily generated.
And I will note that the representative from Supervisor Breed's office is no longer with us. But let's find jurisdiction first. Second, without
Is there any
objection.
public comment regarding jurisdiction? There are no members of the public present. The motion to find jurisdiction passes without objection.
Okay. And then, do we want to address right now whether to proceed with this in light of the absence of Supervisor Breed's representative? I will note that Mr. Ng has indicated that he can provide a general summary of the position, though it will not be Supervisor Breed's position. Is that?
Right. I mean, I can present on behalf of the Office of the Clerk of the Board, just because we were dropped off documents to deliver to Mr. Petrellis, and we can kind of offer our perspective as to what we know, and then also present what the letter that Supervisor Breed's office drafted.
Okay.
And there might even be a statement. Why don't we just try to proceed and see if
Yeah.
we've got enough?
Sure. Okay.
Hear from the complainant.
Okay, Michael Petrellis again. My request to Supervisor Breed was for all of her calendar, an identifiable record. Her calendar from January 1st, 2014 through January 31st of this year. And I had a lot of runaround. I'll share the paper records that were eventually released to me, and you can see in the public records the small size of the calendar listings. Wilson Ng had to serve as the intermediary between myself and the supervisor's office. I've never had this happen before, where I've made a request to a San Francisco public official who's covered by all the sunshine laws, and that official doesn't respond to me, instead goes to a third party, the clerk of the board. I believe some of the emails back and forth, especially between Wilson and myself, are included in your packet. So even though her calendar, even though Supervisor Breed's calendar is in an electronic format, she was refusing to turn it over to me. There was also a problem where the clerk of the board was supposedly under the order, and Wilson can correct me if I'm wrong, that even the clerk of the board couldn't put those documents into the copier and make them a PDF. So much burden burden was put on me. We're talking about burden a lot here tonight. The burden was put on me to deal with the third party. I also had to get down here to City Hall. I had to pay money to get this document, and it's very interesting to now learn that Section 8.12.5 of the City Administrative Code says it's electronic distribution of multi-page documents. Subject to the provisions of subsection B, no city agency, department shall publish, print, or otherwise reproduce documents, memoranda, study, etc., including an annual report required under section 1.56, where the document is more than 10 pages in length. The officer, department, or agency shall instead distribute copies of such documents electronically. This section is saying that because multi-page documents that are over 10 pages should be distributed electronically, it's one more reason why I filed this complaint. You can see there dozens of pages were turned over to me. Why her office couldn't just put these records into a PDF maker and send them to me, I don't know. I'm going to show on the screen here that I have, hold on. I have filed a follow-up request for 3.5 months of her her calendar, and Connor Johnson, who's not here, is now saying that the calendar is a voluminous record. This frequently happens where...
Hold on a sec. Victor, can you make it not... It's fuzzy.
I may have to send it around so you can read it. I only have one copy.
Good.
Here we go again, where they're saying it's a voluminous record. It's a Google Calendar. It's already in electronic format, and now her office is saying the latest request, which is not part of my complaint, but I still wanted to bring to your attention to see the continuing problem I'm going to have, because I'm going to continue to file requests for her calendar. They're going to be claiming it's a voluminous record. Well, looking on what she produced for the 13-month period, I would not characterize that as voluminous. Thank you.
Blah, blah, blah. Can we hear from Wilson?
Yes, and let's hear from I don't see anybody here to provide facts or evidence in support of the complainant. So let's hear from the respondent, or from Mr. Ng, rather.
Poor guy. Thanks. Hi, Wilson Ng, Office of the Clerk of the Board. Just to offer a little bit of perspective and to present the letter that President Breed had provided. So on February 23rd, they received a request from Mr. Petrellis for, and I quote, an electronic copy of President London Breed, Connor Johnson, and Valerie Brown's work calendars from January 1st, 2014 through January 31st, 2015. From our perspective, the Clerk of the Board did receive Connor Johnston and Valerie Brown's calendars first, and in which case the aides provided it directly to our attention. We went ahead and scanned those and provided those to Mr. Petrellis.
Slowly? You got them from the aides, and you did what?
And then we scanned them and then provided to Mr. Petrellis, because...
You scanned them and emailed the PDFs to Mr. Petrellis?
Right, because they were dropped off. They were dropped off on at our desk. And then we went ahead and just delivered that. And I personally emailed them to Mr. Petrellis.
Okay.
And
keep
then,
going.
the aides did tell me that Supervisor Breed's calendar will require a little bit additional time, because it did require a couple of additional steps for review. They needed to consult with the City Attorney's Office, as in an earlier matter, Connor Johnson mentioned that was their internal processes, that they run everything by the City Attorney's Office. In which case, they provided the final calendar in a sealed envelope to us. In which case, I made arrangements with Mr. Petrellis to deliver it to him.
In which case he had requested that the clerk of the board scan those documents. Unfortunately, in that instance, we're not privy to that information if it's in a sealed envelope, and it's not our process to open contents of supervisors' offices. However, Mr. Petrellis did request from us whether it would be appropriate that whether he can review the documents in person or whether he would like to photograph the documents, and I said that's completely fine. He did come in, he did review the documents and opted to pay for the production of those documents, in which case I wrote a receipt for him and charged him 10 cents a page because these documents were produced in hard copy. So, per President Breed's memo, she does believe this complaint is without merit and would like to request that this matter be discharged.
Can we just go to questions?
Okay, thank you. And seeing nobody here to provide facts and evidence on behalf of the respondent, the matter is with the committee.
So the only thing I'm having trouble with, Wilson, can you help me again? There were calendars requested of
It was
three
for
individuals.
3 individuals: President Breed, Aide Connor Johnston, and Aide Valley Brown.
Not Juan Cerda? You didn't want to know about Juan's kid? Never mind.
No, apparently not.
Whatever. So you said that for the first 2, for the aides, somehow you got the paper records from the supervisor's office and you scanned them in, you or somebody in the office scanned them into a PDF,
Right.
sent them to Mr. Petrellis, and that was the end of it?
I personally did it because
You did personally,
it's
okay.
just as a matter of customer service.
Okay, so
it was just
what
easier
was
that way.
the difference/problem with doing the same thing for the stuff from Supervisor Breed?
So to my
where I'm lost.
knowledge, Supervisor's Breed's calendar had to be reproduced into hard copy so that they can.
But what you got was hard copy.
No, I didn't receive President Breed's calendar.
No.
From the
What
aides, right?
From the aides,
From the
what you
aides.
got was hard copy, right?
Right, and I don't believe any of the information on the aides' calendars were redacted.
It
right?
was actually, but keep going.
It was okay. Well, okay. I don't have that in front of me, but President Breed's calendar, they needed additional review by this city
Fine.
attorney's
So when they were
office.
done with that, they gave you hard copy, like with the aides.
But that one was in a sealed envelope,
And then the difference was,
They don't open seal envelopes.
we don't open.
and
we
what you
don't
got
open
from
letters.
the aides was not in a seal. I mean, I don't get the distinction of a sealed envelope.
Well,
What did you get from the
So-
aides? You got.
They just came by our office and literally
And said,
just dropped
"Here."
off. It's like, hey, we printed it out. Here you go.
Okay.
And they provided it as they produced it.
Okay.
For President Breed's calendar, they said, there were more items that they had to review.
Okay.
In which they did.
So this came in a sealed envelope, which looked like whatever. So
Right.
when you schlepped on down here to get it. When you did that, could you have said to Wilson at the counter, "Hey, just like the other ones, can you just scan them and send them to me as a PDF?" Did that question come up?
Yes, that did come up, and I verbally requested that, I believe, on the telephone and again when I was in the clerk's office. And because the equipment is not for use by the public, Wilson could not allow me to just...
No, not for you to do it, but if Mr. Petrellis requested you to scan them into a PDF like you did for the other stuff, were you not able, not willing, some
My
policy
recollection
precluded it?
is, yes, I made a verbal request
So
to
Wilson-
Wilson to do that.
How'd you respond to that?
Because again, my objective was just to deliver the envelope, and that's exactly what I did. We don't take requests from the public to go ahead and scan. Otherwise, any member of the public can walk in with a stack of paper and say, "Can you scan?"
But he
this for me?"
wasn't. He was taking a stack of paper that he got from you relative to an earlier request. Come on, I mean, if someone comes in and says, "I've got 900 pages, can you spend the next 2 hours scanning them?" you would properly say no. If someone says, "This document that I got from your office, I would prefer to get in another form, can you just do that and send it to me and it'll take you 3 minutes?"
Right.
Wouldn't you say, yes?
Unfortunately, in this instance, I wasn't instructed to do so
By?
by the clerk of the board, by President
What-
Breed's office.
What would it have taken to make that difference? Would it have been Peggy telling you just do it?
Again, the envelope was just literally left on our desk for Mr. Petrellis to pick up, and that's exactly what it is. We didn't want to intervene with the delivery between.
If you had called the supervisor's office and said, you sent me a pile of thing, the guy's coming to get it, can I just scan it and email it to him? And if they had said, if you want to do that, fine, would you have then done that?
If I was instructed to do so, because they would be the ones producing.
Could you
the
have
records.
made the call? I mean, I'm just trying to cut through and solve the problem here. I'm not worried about the $5.80 or even the trip down to City Hall, but just the, if you can do it and kind of make him go away. I mean, we're spending a lot of time talking about this and don't need to be. And you're a reasonable guy, which is why we're.
But.
So there are two issues that we need to just make a decision on. One is were they produced in a timely manner, and two, were they produced in a reasonably, were they produced in a reasonable format? Unfortunately, Supervisor Breed's representative, I keep on saying Supervisor President Breed's office representative is not here to to speak on either of those topics, other than what we've seen in the emails or the correspondence in the file, in their contention that it is a voluminous request.
I have a question. If the respondent is not present, can you still consider this matter? And I also would like to publicly acknowledge Wilson Ang has done, I think, a terrific job, given the rock and a hard place he was in dealing with me. He was the third party. He was the go-between. He is not the person. He does not bear the burden of all this. So I just want to acknowledge he's done good work on this, okay? But my central question is, can you consider my complaint when the respondent has not sent a representative here or is not in the room right now?
Well, we have done that before. We have actually found violations, knowledgeable representative, because this is not a matter, this is a complaint not against the clerk of the board. It's a complaint against Supervisor Breed. Supervisor Avalos gave you what you wanted in the form you wanted it in, and Supervisor Breed didn't, and there's no one here for us to ask questions about that.
So I do have a statement from President Breed's aide that was sent to me, as a matter of fact. And if it's appropriate, I'll just read it into the record.
When did you get it?
Just now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This just in.
Whoa.
And the statement is as follows, Mr. Johnson has given me permission to read this into the record. The complainant requested an enormous volume of information. Our office devoted substantial time to collecting it. It was then printed so that certain private information could be manually redacted. The complainant received all the information he requested within the time stipulated in the law. If the complainant is not happy with the format of that disclosure, we are happy to provide future information in a different format. And so concludes the statement, which, it does answer a couple of our questions. Why was it printed out? Why was it hard copy printed out? And that's because they did the redactions manually. I haven't looked through this to really, there's some attempt to, it looks more like highlighting than redactions, unfortunately, but that would explain that aspect of it. And
There's one page in the packet that was redacted to one of the aides.
And it appears to be manually redacted, which may just mean that their office does not know how to perform electronic redactions or perhaps convert the file into a PDF and then do it, which is, a learning curve. Give them the benefit of the doubt for the moment. The expression that the complainant received all the information that he requested within the time stipulated in the law, do you dispute that, Mr. Petrellis?
Do not.
Okay. And the final statement that they are happy to provide future information in a different format. I wish they were here to sort of, get to the bottom of what that other format could be and what was within their capability. But that's perhaps something that hopefully they're listening to this.
I have to say that this entire matter, I have felt President Breed has not adhered to the spirit of the law, and that she has all too willingly placed too much of a burden on Wilson and the clerk's office. And if they want to talk about substantial time and burdens, I can turn around and say it's a substantial amount of my time to schlep down to City Hall to go over those things by paper, and the burden of $5.37. It's all I'm saying is I'm not buying what Connor Johnson is saying in his statement.
Well,
and I do want to point out just this section that I was reading of the ordinance, section 67.21-1, policy regarding use and purchase of computer systems, and this is talking specifically in the context of when new computer systems are being purchased. Departments shall attempt to reach the following goals as a means to achieve lower costs to the public in connection with the public disclosure of records. And then subsection 2 says implementing a system that permits reproduction of electronic copies of records in a format that is generally recognized as an industry standard format. It's a little vague, but I think that it bears on does the office have an obligation to reproduce an electronic record in a way? Could they have done this in a way that reduced the cost to the public? I think that you've sort of expressed that it was a negligible cost, $5.80. That is a relative assessment. $5.80 might be more to some people, and certainly that cost could be a lot higher when you're talking about a more voluminous request. But I think I'm just raising it as something that should bear in our consideration of whether this should have been, not could have been, but should have been produced in a better format. Yes, Member Petralis. I keep on doing that. Member Popel, excuse me.
What did I do? I guess I don't know enough about the technical stuff with Google Calendar, if there's a way to do an export from Google Calendar as a PDF. I don't know. And just looking at some of these calendars, in a lot of cases, this just shows one item per day, which seems odd and unlikely to me. So whatever. I guess I'm not getting to the substance of the thing. The only thing that's still bothering me a little bit is the letter from Supervisor Breed, the paragraph where the office of the, I want to just read that for a second.
Yeah,
Page 42. The office of the clerk of the board was requested to facilitate delivery of applicable PDFs. Applicable hard copies of documents were placed in an envelope at the front desk with the office of the clerk of the board, who was instructed not to tamper with the documents as they were intended for pickup by the recipient. Mr. Petralis was made available the existence and format of the produced documents. Somehow I just think there was a miscommunication. I'm struggling to believe that the supervisor or their office were somehow intending to make paper records available only and make them difficult and hard. That seems unlikely, unusual, and odd. I think with better communication, such as a phone call back and forth, is this okay? Yes, it's okay. Great, that would be nice. This all could have been made to go away. Just scan it and send it. I don't want to say that this is some huge precedent that a department can be required to PDF anything on demand. We've had that item before, and I believe I dissented when that issue came before the task force. I think where it's not a big burden, not a lot of documents, and is good for everybody, then that's fine. But to say, well, we found, 15,000 responsive documents over the course of time, and, in addition to not being able to charge for staff time to make copies and redact and all that, now you want us to PDF it as well, I think departments can sort of draw the line at some point.
Well, but making PDFs is not really a big deal.
Right. Well, but it depends on how much. 58 pages, I think, is fine for this, and they should have. Whether or not this is an actual violation, I'm kind of on the fence. I'm not sure that it is. It certainly would have been better to avoid this. I guess that's my bottom line.
I'm inclined to not find a violation, but part of me wishes that we could convey the message succinctly that you should probably find a better way to do this, and there is a better way to do this, and we can help you do this in a better way.
You want to do that via a hearing at the full task force? And
I don't know.
Connor? I mean, I think they'd show if we kick this to the full task force without recommendation.
I think they would have to show.
Well, I think if we could find a violation of 67.21E for failing to have someone here we could ask questions to.
Yeah, I mean,
and talk about best practices and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of just finding a 21E violation.
Yeah, I think
it could be stronger if there were more of a thing there.
And Mr. Ng, did you have something to relay?
I'm in agreement with you, Chair Hubner, that I do think that it's a bit of a technical issue, and since Connor has expressed that he's willing to, for future requests that he's willing to provide in a specific format, I can perhaps reach out to them and see if I can do some technical training as well, because I am well versed in being able to export calendars and apply redactions which aren't highlighted, as you say. So.
I mean, if they could have exported this to a PDF, that would have taken care of it. Or if they could have just said, here, we've got documents from Mr. Petrellis, we'll just send them to Wilson and you can figure out how to get them to him.
Right.
That would have been fine. I mean, I think the whole sealed envelope thing made it unnecessary. There was
How
some
about
step
finding a violation of, as you pointed out, 67.21
L?
-1E?
And that is the provision relating to the format of electronic records to reduce cost to the public.
I've got problems finding a violation of 21-1 because that's really just a policy statement about systems. I think we'd be better with, if you're going to find any violation, it's a 21L violation for not putting it into a format that's easily available to a department. I mean, that's really where it is if there's any violation.
Okay.
Right. And frankly, I'll be frank, I'm okay not finding a violation here under the with the assurance that Mr. Ng is going to reach out to Mr. Johnston and figure that out. And this is a calendaring thing. This is a calendaring issue. We haven't been clear on whether supervisors are subject to the calendar requirement.
Right.
It's definitely a hot topic right now, as we are proposing amendments to make that more clear. And if the only flaw here is technological in nature, then maybe use this as an opportunity to educate and lead into a more clear statement with our amendment. I'm floating the idea, and Member Washburn, do you have thoughts on that?
I'm really of two minds about it. On the one hand, I'm frustrated that the supervisor's representative isn't here right now. And I think that office could have worked in a more helpful way with Mr. Petrellis.
And yet they produced the records within the statutory time
They
limit.
did. Okay, all right. Let's not send him to jail then.
I mean, if there were an abject violation of the timeliness,
Yeah, you're right.
then it would be easier to do this. But Mr. Petrellis, did you have something to add?
Yes.
In fact, why don't we do rebuttals, like a proper rebuttal,
rebuttals.
and then this will be your rebuttal.
Okay.
We
What
have
am I
to
going to
have-
get?
no,
3 minutes?
No, Mr. Ng has one first.
Oh, excuse me.
I actually don't have a rebuttal. I mean, I'm more than willing to work with the office. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure Wilson Ang has enjoyed every moment he's had to deal with me, and he's probably looking forward to spending more time with me regarding the other requests that are going to be going to Supervisor Breed for her calendars. I don't want to come back here about this matter, and I'm bringing this up because the statement that you read from Connor Johnston didn't specify that I would get the records in PDFs and sent to me via email. I don't know when he says it'll be sent in a different format. Is he going to send me a floppy disk? Reading through that email, I see a continuation.
You'd like that.
A policy of putting hurdles in front of me every step of the way. My question for you is, why is it Mr. Wilson gets to spend his Tuesday evening here with us? He is not the office that received the complaint. I don't know if there can be if there's a violation in any way when the public official passes the records along to a third party and puts a burden on the requester to now deal with a third party and all of these other issues that the public official has put on both the third party and the member of the public. Where does that come in? How can a public official put the documents, put the whole thing into a third party's lap?
Well, I appreciate your sensitivity to Mr. Ng's inconvenience in this matter. I'm sure he does as well. And and thank you to Mr. Ng, too. You did stay, and you didn't really have to on this.
I wanted to invite Mr. Petralis to be sure and come to when this is on the calendar for the full task force, because we will
Talk about it.
Chair Hepner will sum it up for the full task force.
Right.
And in the meantime, you will have gotten something back from your next request.
Right.
Okay, so.
And whether or not we find a violation, it'll go to the full task force.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
well, so we'll be revisiting this. It's not going, you won't let it go away. Right.
So in terms of resolution, I'm thinking about a motion to recommend no violation, acknowledge the offer that Supervisor Breed's aide made, and maybe ask Wilson to work with Supervisor Breed's office to memorialize that in a letter to the full task force. So essentially to say that you'll try to resolve these things in a better way in the future. If you get documents from an office and you're asked to facilitate, if it's not a huge burden, you'll find a way to PDF it and just get rid of the thing. And so,
Right. So
something nice like that, and we'll see that for June.
Okay. I was just hoping to send out technical instructions on how to export a calendar, and we actually do have
That's
a
fine,
redaction
too.
policy in place. It's just technically how to do that.
That's fine too. I mean, again, the more we can learn here from one office and translate a best practice to all of the supervisors' offices, even before and without the calendar requirement. They all they do their own little thing with the 3 aides and the 1 supervisor, and they think, well, that's great. Well, okay, but if one is doing it one way and 3 doors down the hall they're doing it a different way, and there's a better way to do it all the way around, let's just figure that out and get them all with the program, right? I mean, that's where I think Wilson comes in handy and is a good resource. So, all right, do I need to restate that as a motion?
I believe that is the motion, to find no violation, to accept Supervisor Breed's offer to provide future documents in a requested format, and that Wilson Ng, with the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors, shall provide a letter to the task force regarding his offer to train and provide technical support to supervisors to assist the supervisors in providing documents in other formats.
And I'll second that.
Are you good with
The
that?
public in the room?
All right, good.
There are no members of the public in the room on that motion. Member Pilpil.
Aye.
Pilpil, aye. Member Washburn.
Aye.
Washburn, aye. Chair Hepner.
Aye.
Hepner, aye. The motion passes. Next on the agenda, public comment. Members of the public may address the complaint committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction but not on today's agenda.
Michael Petrellis. Again, I want to thank the Complaint Committee for providing this opportunity for me to present these matters before your independent body. The only problem I really have is that this meeting was not broadcast on TV, and I am pushing a number of city agencies to take care of getting this room wired for cameras. I'd also like to thank Wilson for taking all this time to be here. And last but not least, I look forward to coming back in June before the full commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is no further public comment. Item number 7, announcements, comments, questions, and future agenda items. There being no announcements, next on the agenda, item 8, adjournment.
All right, adjourned.